My name is Cadence Harper, and today we are analyzing the movie called Legends of the Fall. So, masculinity in media can be integrated in various different ways and can actually be very pivotal for forming societal beliefs about stereotypical behavior within toxic or positive masculinity. In the movie Legends of the Fall, and directly looking at the character named Tristan, a lot of different conclusions could be drawn about him. For background, this movie was set in the early 1900s and revolves around Tristan and his family, who live kind of in this isolated ranch away from the rest of society and not under the control of the government. And Tristan's character is initially seen as having very toxic masculinity. He kind of has this tough cowboy demeanor and a curiosity for danger, and he doesn't really apply societal rules to himself. So that makes him very masculine in terms of society's definition. But some of these toxic behaviors really come into play after he goes to war with his two brothers. During the war, one of his brothers unfortunately passed away, and that really sent Tristan into this big spiral. He went on a killing spree and was scalping the enemies and keeping that for himself, and it took him a very long time to finally come back home. And when he did, he actually fell in love with a woman named Susanna, who was supposed to marry his now deceased brother. At this point in the movie, a lot of people are really beginning to dislike Tristan. With this newly found love for his deceased brother's future wife, he eventually realizes that he's not really over his brother's death and has a lot of PTSD-like episodes, and eventually puts Susanna's life at stake because of that. So Tristan decides to leave her and go on this kind of adventure exhibition where he's just trying to find that missing piece to gain a sense of control, because everything else in his life was out of control. But these impulsive behaviors were really just a reflection of his internal battles. But this impulsivity leads the audience to believe that he's emotionally blind and cruel. And this is where he's seen as a villain emulating toxic masculinity. Though Tristan did do some utterly insane things and nearly made a trip to hell and back on this adventure that he went on, can his suffering truly not be justified? To mourn means to have loved, and Tristan has so much to mourn with every plot twist in the movie. He feels things deeply and has an unmovable protective sense over those that he cares for, which is really the epitome of positive masculinity. His abandonment to Susanna was really an act of love. He was selfless enough to leave her so he could protect her from his pain. He was gentle and kind with his wife and children that he has later on in the movie, despite the world not being gentle or kind to him. His wild actions that can be seen as toxic are really just reactions to the pain that he's feeling inside. And all of his behaviors are coming from a place of heartbreak and grief, meaning that his love was true and deeply rooted. One of Tristan's mentors in the movie that he learns a lot from describes this suffering and this trip that he goes on as a bear inside him that needs to be tamed. And I feel as if every person can relate to the idea of an internal monster that we're at battle with. And in order to overcome that, we must heal. Tristan's bear can be seen as this metaphor for the PTSD from the war and his grieving from all of the loss that he's had to suffer. But this toxic masculinity was really just his struggle with trying to figure out how to heal. And what some people see as a monster can really be seen in a heroic sense. It just takes intentional thought and unconditional regard. This happened with his other brother, actually. He was very angry with Tristan for such a long time, but learned to see the truth within his own hurt. And there's this moment between the two of them. They're sitting on this hill, and it isn't until they're in front of the graves of all of their beloved that he realizes Tristan didn't choose this. He did not choose to be a deep feeler. He did not choose to care for people with such a magnitude. But now he has to suffer because he loved the hardest. Tristan only ever hurt others because he was hurt too. He just bled on people that didn't cut him because he didn't know how to heal. And for that, he's seen as dishonorable. And I feel like this is a major and relevant issue in today's society. The ignorance to vulnerabilities and deeper meanings. That's the sort of thing that actually does contribute to toxic masculinity, is the rejection of the things that make us human. Study from the University of Innsbruck by Tamara Saylor explains the role of portraying emotions in media. She goes on to say that consumer attitudes towards advertising is an emotion-based construct that reflects how consumers feel about a specific advertising stimulus when exposed to it for a certain amount of time, and therefore react with liking or disliking. I just think that this goes to show that since media is emotionally constructed, it's important to exemplify emotionally driven content when aiming to persuade an audience to feel some type of way. And in the Legends of the Falls case, we're pushed to mourn the losses with the characters, but point blame and anger towards the negative behavior following that loss. What media cannot fully capture is the idea that Tristan's wild behavior is not the problem, but the only way that he knows how to escape from the actual problem. And this is why it's so important to pull yourself from the black and white thinking and step into a gray area where perspectives can be shifted and emotions can be fully understood. Because the media gives us the behaviors and the emotions, but it's up to the audience to understand the soul within it. A camera can't capture what a heart could. So what purpose would persuasive media have if there's no heart involved with receiving this information? There's an authenticity to Tristan's suffering. It shows that to love means to mourn. And the thing that society needs to grasp is that loving would not be so wonderful and grand if we never knew suffering. They have to coexist. We wouldn't understand one without the other. And how wonderful is it to love something with such a gravity that we cannot help but grieve in their absence. And that is exactly what makes Tristan human. It makes him raw and real. But that sort of vulnerability and intense emotion can be intimidating to most people and is often construed negatively. That's why he is initially seen in a poor manner. And society could break so many stereotypes and perceptions of toxic masculinity simply by taking the time and efforts to accept the heaviest degrees of emotion, because that's what separates us from the rest of the world, is the ability to feel things, So it'd be best to not shy away from that and accept the vulnerability, to see it as an art and not a curse. To conclude, masculinity in media can be contorted just as much as it gets contorted in real life. And we are given the opportunity to witness behaviors and emotions play out, but continuously fail to grasp the why behind it. And the issue at stake is that everyone looks at things through their personal perceptions, which makes it easy to blame Tristan as the bad man who's out of control. However, real power comes from looking outside oneself at the larger perspective, to sit in the place that Tristan did and take time to understand where he's coming from. Ignorance contributes to these stereotypes that seemingly run the society that we live in. But as humans, it is our duty to be open to these vulnerabilities. We must be empathetic and mindful, because it's really the only way to escape the boundaries that society places on us. The things that society turns evil, we must intentionally find the good in. Otherwise, people like Tristan will forever be stuck in their pain and only marginalized and never actually helped.